Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from today. My name is Dennis Redmond. I'm a volunteer with the Hudson Valley Park of Study and Reflection. And I'd like to welcome you to our presentation today entitled When Life Doesn't End with Death, Accompanying People as They Approach Death. This is the second in a series of presentations that we are hosting, all connected to a campaign at the park to build our meditation hall or sala. It's an ongoing campaign, and we're very glad to have you join with us today. We've choosing for these presentations themes that are very closely connected to the park's purpose, related to the development of human consciousness, the overcoming of suffering, and social change based on active nonviolence. Many of us are familiar with the adage that's attributed to Benjamin Franklin that says, in this world, nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes. Yet despite the inevitability and the fact that all of us lose loved ones throughout our life, we are often very hesitant to talk about death. Perhaps some of it has to do with some of that hesitancy derives from the uncertainty that we may feel about what comes after death. Perhaps some of it comes from the pain of no longer having a loved one physically present in our lives. For our three guests today, however, the process of dying and of helping others can be experiences of great meaning and can provide deep insight and inspiration for those of us who are still living. We're very happy to have them today, and I'd like to begin by introducing our first guest, Victor Viccininni. Hola, buenas tardes, Victor. Victor is joining us today from Buenos Aires. Victor began participating in the current of thought inspired by Silo, the Argentinian writer and thinker, in 1978. Subsequently, he collaborated in the construction of the humanist movement in the Americas, in Europe, and in Africa. Currently, he is a member of the World Center for Humanist Studies and founder of Rejuno, the Humanist Network of Health News. Victor is the author of several books based on New Humanist psychology, including The Art of Accompaniment, Tools and Practices for Personal and Spiritual Accompaniment in Palliative Care and End of Life, which was very recently published in English translation and is available on Amazon for those interested in getting it. It's a wonderful book. We've invited Victor here today to talk a little bit and to give us a presentation about some of the themes that he outlines in his book. So Victor, thank you again very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Dennis. Thank you very much for this invitation to participate in this event. My thanks to all the friends at the Hudson Valley Park for the invitation, and even more for the wonderful project that they are promoting and building.
Thank you.
First of all, I would like to apologize for my limited English. It is possible that many of my words may not be understood, but I am sure that you will be able to understand the real meaning of the ideas that I will try to transmit and to share with you. Dennis, I can follow, okay?
Please, yes, please, continue.
Okay. Starting with the topic that brings us together today, I would like to say that all of us are in transit through this life, through this world, toward a destiny that is sometimes hopeless or uncertain, sometimes suspected or desired, sometimes dreamed or intuited. How do we accompany people who are embarking on this journey? How can we lighten the burden of unnecessary weight that can halt their flight? Care and accompaniment for people who are going through critical moments or who are approaching the end of life is a noble task full of significance and meaning. It is an activity that does not require special qualities. My personal experience in accompanying many people in the final moments of their physical existence has reinforced in me the internal confirmation that physical death represents a moment of profound internal transformation and a passage toward a new destination. Many people are in the position of caring for and accompanying others. In this situation, many questions tend to arise. What is the most appropriate thing to do? What do I say or not to say? And at any given moment, how can I help to calm the mental suffering that crushes the hearts of those who are departing and also their dear people? How can I help to produce a reconciliation that may spread its wings and transform both life and death? How to radiate the kindness and true compassion that are deep within me? When I have been able to give new meaning to the moment of death, it has also given new meaning to my perception of life and brought me closer to a dimension where an inner peace springs up within me. In those moments, a deep understanding of the meaning of human existence and the confirmation of spiritual transcendence are present. My deep gratitude to Silo, who with his teaching opened the door of true meaning to me, and in this way allowed me to discover that life doesn't end in the absurd objectivization of death. The fundamental ideas of the book that Dennis showed and that I have written are based on the teaching of the philosophy of the new humanism and on my personal experience in accompanying others in palliative care and at the end of physical life. The main topics developed in the book are that the fear of death as a source of mental suffering, fear or illness, loneliness, and death underline the cultural and mental background of our society. They are a source of mental suffering throughout life, and even more so in significant situations, for example, accident, palliative care, and end-of-life care. The question is, can we establish a different internal relationship with death that moves us away from the mental suffering to which it seemed to be connected? At the end of life stage, we need to advance from a biomedical model to a multidimensional one. Multidimensional, I mean physical, psychological, existential, and spiritual. How can we humanize the end of life? By moving towards a model that fully integrates all these aspects. A change in outlook toward death for professionals, family members, and companions is a fundamental challenge. So, it's important to understand that the work begins with ourselves. Instead of treating the death as a taboo, as a source of mental suffering, we seek a good death based on a kind and compassionate accompaniment. We need to understand that dying doesn't hurt. The underlying disease can hurt, but we need to differentiate one from the other. Death does not exist as an object or as a monster waiting for us somewhere in life. We need to understand that there is a dying process that, based on the experience of thousands and thousands of professionals and companions in palliative care, can be divided in three clearly stages. Summarizing stage 1, we can say the stage of the chaos, whose most significant indicators are mental suffering, are denial, internal and external struggle, fear, isolation, depression, internal and external violence, and others. That is mental suffering. Each person can express it in different ways, but all of them are an unequivocal indicator of psychological discomfort and mental suffering. It is the irrational fear of losing the superficiality of the self and the body. Then, stage 2, acceptance. This is a transitional stage. Its clearest indicator is accepting the arrival of the departure. It is a surrender, a giving up of control, and the ceasing of the internal fight. Start the register of peace, serenity, well-being begin to appear. And then we will reach stage 3, reconciliation and transcendence. We see registers of deep inner peace, will bring deep reconciliation with life. Many times this stage is accompanied by translation of space and times that the person calls sacred, and a state of a higher level of conscience. For example, intense light, meeting encounters with people who have died, with God, and with the silence and comforting light.
Mm.
So we come to the most we come to the most important conclusion for personal accompaniment in end of life process. It's a conclusion that must imply a profound change in the look and in the location of the companion. The conclusion is that we don't know accompany someone's death or illness. We accompany a process. We accompany a person's process of good dying, and we put ourselves in the disposition to give our best so that person transits from the chaos, the initial chaos, through the acceptance until reaching the possibility of spiritual transcendence. We are just attending the birth of a new being that will continue with its evolutionary process. And for those who don't believe in transcendence, this process helps produce a good death. This process helps produce a good death, one where the dying person is reconciliated with oneself, with the others, with the entire life. And this is our mission as companions. We serve as guides in the transition through different internal mental states until one reaches the possibility of spiritual transcendence. The possibility of a good death. And this is the fundamental change of look that we need make as a companion at that significant moment in life. Thank you a lot. Thank you very much for your attention, and I think that you will understand my limited English.
Very good. Thank you, Victor. We did, and we do appreciate, as someone who struggles with other languages, I certainly appreciate your efforts to speak with us today, so thank you. If it's okay with you, I'd like to ask a few follow-up questions. You talked about this idea that the idea that death is something to be feared really underlies so much of our cultural forms, our mental forms. And even though there are many religions, most religions all have beliefs about life beyond death. For their followers, it's still quite often something that's treated, death is something that's treated as a very tragic and a very sad event. So I appreciate you talking about this change of look that you mentioned at the end. What can someone do to help produce this change of look towards death that you spoke about?
Well, I believe that the good beginning is the personal reflection of each other
Mm.
about the subject of the death, the personal death, and the dear people that are
Hmm.
near us, not the dear people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and this reflection uh, uh, will be done in silent, in calm. Uh, for example, a simple question: Am I only a body? Uh, is there something else? Uh, the dear person that, for example, I accompanying is only a physical body.
Mm.
What about their emotions, their memories, their meaning of the life? Mm. So, uh, my personal experience is that the change starts inside yourself. Uh, and you have to overcome the automatic responses of the mind
Hmm.
that say you this is a taboo. Don't talk about the dead. So it's an effort of the conscience to overcome the automatical answer and reflect in calm about these important things uh, for the life of all persons. Mm.
Great. Thank you. Yes, it's almost like we have a self censorship, right? That we're not supposed to talk about this at all, and um,
Don't talk about this. Huh?
don't talk about it exactly. Um, I wanted to, in your book, you write, it is very important that we reconcile ourselves with our inner beings and with those we believe have harmed us or to whom we feel resentful. And I wondered if you talk a little bit more about this process of reconciliation. Why is it so important for the dying person?
This is very important. This is something that is very clearly observed in all the people in that stage. Uh, at the end of life, is the mind needs to integrate the entire life of process of life. So it's a need of the mind. Uh, it is an internal process related to the internal psychophysical energy,
Hmm.
the emotions, memories. Is something that the mind needs to reach the internal sensation that everything is fine. Uh, the sensation of internal unity.
Hmm.
This process of deep reconciliation is very important because we are talking about that the same psychophysical energy that can evolve or transcend into higher states. At the same time, this process of reconciliation allow allow us allows the people that uh, the person is dying to reach the die in peace, calm, softly calm, softly happy. So the person uh, can have a good death. A good death is
Mhm.
possible. It's possible to have a good death in peace, calm, and the process of reconciliation is very important for that issue.
And I love the title of your book.
Is possible to understand, Dennis, more or less?
No, and it's very well understood. Thank you. I was saying I love the title of your book, The Art of Accompaniment, because it really does speak to, there's a very specific role to helping someone, to accompany someone as they go through this process. And it's something, from my experience of working with several people, it's something I've been able to, it is like an art. You learn from each experience, right, to take to the next. When you speak about this process of reconciliation, I wonder how can the person who accompanies that dying person help with that process? I understand why it's very important for the dying person. What can someone who accompanies do to help that person with their reconciliation?
Well, for my experience, the first important thing is that you know the importance of this matter. So the importance, the thing that we are talking about today. So the person, this idea of that is very important, the accompaniment. First, because you are going to pay attention, you are going to pay attention to this idea. You can help to remember you can help to the person that you are accompanying to remember the beautiful moment of the life. You can help him to explore within himself if, for example, are things that he needs to clarify, things he needs to better understand. And you can do this with very simple questions. You don't need a special qualification. Simple question. For example, is there something that is worrying you? Would you like to talk about something that you need to talk? Would you like to talk or to see some particular person, some special person? You need to encounter with some particular person that we need. You are thinking you need. Also, there are other type of things. For example, you can show him pictures of the life, of the beautiful moment of their life. So you will help to do this reconciliation process that we were talking about a few minutes ago. But the main point is that for you, the more important thing is the process of the person and not the taboo or the automatic response that our education gave us about the deed. No? So if you put yourself in the position that you are helping a process of the person that you accompany, this is a very important thing to start.
Beautiful, thank you. I love that idea of sort of creating that space for someone to go through the process that they need to just by asking questions that help them to think through that. And you also, you speak beautifully in the book about how for you reconciliation is really about trying to understand your life. It's not necessarily trying to justify or produce forgiveness. It's just really trying to get an understanding of what is. And that's also a beautiful concept of reconciliation, is that kind of deep understanding and acceptance of what has happened. You say that there are no special qualities for an accompanier, but I wonder if there's any kind of attitude that you would recommend for someone who's doing this work.
Well, first is I would like to repeat this idea. It's important that the person, the companion, understand what is happening inside the person. This stage, this process. Do not only pay attention to the body. Pay attention to the things that are running inside. Second point is it is focus your mind on the best of yourself. So this is an important idea. The work starts inside myself as a company. So focus your mind on the best of yourself and at the same time on the best of the person that you are accompanying. That is, try to establish other type of communication. Try to establish a heart-to-heart communication and not a body-body communication. No?
Heart-to-heart.
Heart-to-heart communication, and not with the problems that you have in your mind. Heart-to-heart communication. And also remember always that the priority is always the process of the person is dying, not the pain that you are feeling or the loss that you feel because the dear person is departure. So of course you feel pain, but the priority is not your feeling, it's the situation and the process of the person that you are accompanying. And it is important because the true compassion is based on putting as top priority and top attention what the other person feels, what the other person needs, not what one wants can happen. I mean not in my needs, right, in the needs of the other person.
Great. Victor, thank you very much. We really appreciate you coming on and speaking with us today. We're gonna go right now to two other guests that we have with us, but I hope you'll stick around because we may have some time for questions at the end. So thank you again. As I mentioned, I want to bring on two other guests now who personally have had experiences of sort of accompanying people through this process of death, and we wanted to hear them, talk to them a little bit about what their experience is. Our next guests are Emiko Nagano and Janet Shirley. Welcome, both of you. Emiko is a volunteer also at Hudson Valley Park of Study and Reflection, and is currently on our fundraising committee, which is overseeing this campaign for the building of the Sala, the meditation hall. So thank you, Emiko. I have to say, Emiko is also an excellent chef, and she also cooks for many of the activities we do at the park. So many talents we appreciate in that way as well. She's joining us today from Queens, New York. And Janet is a native of San Francisco. Her interest in today's theme began when she worked as a hospice volunteer in Washington, D.C. several decades ago. She has recently organized a 5-part workshop on death and dying entitled The 5 Invitations: What Death Can Teach Us About Living, Janet's an active member of CELO's Message and was one of the founding members of the Center of Study and Reflection in Red Bluff, California. And she's joining us today from San Rafael, California, amidst all the fires. So we're glad you're safe and with us today, Janet.
Thank you.
So thank you both. I wondered if you could just also just start by talking briefly about what your personal experiences have been in sort of accompanying people, is in Victor's term, the sort of personal and spiritual accompaniment of those dying. What have your personal experiences been with that? Emiko, would you start?
Sure. My most significant experience accompanying the dying was with my mother. My mother died 10 years ago after a few years of battling cancer. The end of January 2010, she was diagnosed with terminal stage cancer. And then a doctor advised her to be in a hospice care at that point. So two of my sisters and I decided to stop what we were doing, and we decided to go home to the parents' house to be with her and then our father, and then we provided care for the next 2 months until she passed. And she died at home. She died very peacefully, while surrounded by all her daughters and a granddaughter. And she died very well. She had a very good death, as Victor used the term good death.
Mm-hmm. Great. And Janet, for you?
I have followed the teachings of Argentine thinker and spiritual guide CELO for many years. And in a public chat he gave one time, he said, life would have no meaning if everything ended in death. He's also said that in some books that he's written. And I got very intensely curious about that statement. And I thought to myself, I'm not familiar with death at all. It was sort of a taboo subject. I never had seen anybody die, and I had lost some loved ones in the past, but I was never with them for any amount of time, and I certainly didn't see their physical deaths. So I decided that I wanted to become familiar. I wanted this because I felt like I wouldn't be afraid of it if I got to know it. And so I volunteered for hospice in Washington, D.C., and I spent several years accompanying people through that process. And it was so transformational. I'm so grateful for that experience that I had no idea how helpful that experience was going to be later when my mother got terminal cancer, and I worked with her until she passed. And also I've had some very close friends and other family members who have gotten ill, and I've accompanied them. And the whole act of accompaniment really is something that's profoundly spiritual. And I think Emiko would agree with me. It's transformational. And it's one of those things that sooner or later we're all going to have to deal with it in one way or another. But it can be an incredible opportunity to really help somebody in a very unitive way. And also it will change you.
What does that term accompanying mean to you, Janet? You talk about what a great experience it was. What did you see has been involved in that process of accompanying?
I think it's to fully embrace the other person in all aspects, their physical, their mental state. And Victor talked a lot about one's internal preparation when you go to be with somebody is just to begin to reflect on life things. We're a culture of doing. And with death and the process of dying, I think you need to ask yourself, how do I want to be with that other person? What does that other person need from me? And a very good principle to follow is to treat others the way you'd like to be treated. How, in the heart of hearts, do I think that person would like to be treated in this moment? So with this reflection, you can go to the other and to leave kind of your ego or your small I. Try to leave it to the side when you're working with that person. It's no longer about you at all. You have to really be present and full attention with the other.
Great. Emiko, what does accompaniment mean to you?
Sure. For me, well, my mother and I are both atheists, but I always believed that the spirituality is a very essential part of being a human being. But my mother struggled to separate the religious sentiment from the spirituality. So she was not keen on this idea of life after death. But I do believe life doesn't end with death. But prior to my mother's passing, I believe that, but without conviction. But then in Silo's teaching and in humanism teaching, that we do have this talk of life after death, and then it's in the ceremony of assistance that we have. It talks about the light. There be a delight. So I really wanted to my mother to sort of to reach or to leap, have a transition to that space and time, and to see the lights and then find the lights. So for me, the accompaniment was really, if possibly, help her to have the process of transformation and then transition to the light.
You both sort of touched on this thing of, which I know is not easy to do, that sort of not imposing your own belief, your own desires. Victor talked about it too, about the importance of really thinking about the needs of the others and the needs rather than the needs of yourself. But I think that's a very difficult thing for people to do, especially when the person who's dying is such a close loved one. What was sort of helpful for you to get to that place where you could really focus on the other person, and rather than connecting to your own grief or your own sadness or your own fear? Either one of you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, for me, I saw in the hospice, and this was a few years before my mother got terminal cancer, I saw different models of behavior of how families accompanied their loved ones, and I saw wonderful models of families that just came together and really held that person with love and care. And I saw other families that just, they came once and then they disappeared, and the person was kind of left to their own devices. And so I said, if anything ever happens to my mother, I know what model I want to do. I mean, I just got the clarity working in hospice that there was a certain way I wanted to be with her, and I wanted to be completely at her service. So it was sort of like a surrender. I surrender my ego. I surrender my needs for that moment. The only thing that's important is her. And like Emiko said, trying to help them make that very important transition was something that I had deep in my heart. I wanted her to arrive at a profound reconciliation. If I could help in any way with her doing that, to reconcile with the fact that she had cancer and she was still pretty young, to reconcile with the fact that she had a son who was severely mentally disabled because she had polio when she was young, but he was going to be taken care of, and not to worry about him. So it's sort of like you begin to just make that the bigger desire than your own little needs. That's what you want. You want just the best for that person. And so you put the ego to the side, or you try to, in that moment.
Anything to add to that?
Me? Totally agree with you, Janet. It's really be at the service of the others. And in a dying, in my particular situation, I had sisters and my father. We were all going through this grieving process of losing our mother, who is the focal point of the family. But really, I think the family really took an approach. Well, what is best for mom and what works best for the family. It was, but it was really not about ourselves. So what I need, me, but it's really about her, and then what works for the team. It's a family was a team, and then that worked really well.
Right. In Victor's book, he lays out several tools that can be used and that can be very helpful, both for helping the person go through the process of reconciliation. But he also talks about this ceremony of assistance, which you mentioned, Emiko. And I know it's something that I've used personally. It's really a beautiful, beautiful ceremony that's designed. It was developed by Silo as part of 8 ceremonies that were included in a book called Silo's Message. And it's a ceremony that's about helping people. And you can see it on the screen now. A ceremony that's really designed for helping people at that point in their life. I wondered if either of you could talk a little bit about your experience doing the ceremony with people, and what was it like for them? What was it like for you?
Sorry, I couldn't hear your question, Dennis.
Just to talk a little bit about what was the ceremony like, to do the ceremony with your loved one, and what do you think the experience was like for them, and what was the experience like for you?
I think this ceremony is just really beautiful. And of course, sometimes you have to modify it according to the person you're working with. But I think the basic elements of this ceremony, no matter who the person is, whether they're agnostic or atheist or religious, this ceremony can apply to all of them without any problem. And I think a particular element I like is where you kind of ask the person to recall what was best in them, and to purify their memory. And I think that that's very important, is to help the person remember how really good they were, how many wonderful actions they launched in the world, and that benefited others. And the other thing about rejecting fears and disheartenment, I think it's very important to let the person know we're right there with them. There's nothing to be afraid of. And I'll let Emiko fill in some of the other interpretations.
For me, what strikes me the most about this ceremony is starting with, we ask the dying person to connect with the best of themselves, and then going into guiding them to help them to reconcile. Now, like the Victor's book talks about it too, everybody needs some help. And then especially in the moment of most vulnerable, most maybe lonesome moment, and then we are sitting right next to, we're present with them, and then guiding them and providing this little help so that they can reconcile with their life. I think is the greatest thing that we can offer to your loved ones.
The language, just reading the language now, it's very allegorical, right? It speaks to a lot of things that maybe are not so apparent on sort of first reading. What was it meaning? What was it like for you to do the ceremony, and what did you need to do to get into sort of the proper space to do the ceremony with a loved one?
I think I went on cues, after having worked in hospice for a few years. I could tell often when people, it might be their last 6 hours or their last day or whatever. And I really tried to imagine actually that I was in their place with them. And I'd say, don't be afraid, reject disheartenment. I think that's really important for me anyway, rejecting disheartenment, keep going towards the ascent. And I think also if it's a loved one and you have some time with them, and if you have some time with them before they die, that's a huge gift, is to go over this ceremony with them before they get to those final stages, and ask them if it's okay to read this ceremony and have them get a little bit familiarized with it, I think is quite helpful. And again, respecting what they believe. Like in my case, my mother believed in God. And so I just said, you know, there's going to be a light. You'll see God. You'll see, you know, and kind of respecting her wishes at the same time incorporating the ceremony.
For me, I started doing the ceremony of assistance with my mother after I interpreted as a signal from her that she was opening to this idea of transitioning, or at least that she's she was opening to the acceptance of her time being ending. Towards the end of her life, she also developed dementia. So there are moments, you know, the more the time progressed, that she spent more time sleeping. Sometimes she was awake and lucid. Sometimes she's awakened but not lucid. So, but in her talking, I sort of sensed, you know, there are certain things that she's talking about, which is not, in my rational mind, it was not factual, but then I could see that's what she's going through internally. She's processing things. So, like I said, she was not a believer of a spiritual life, but at that, and then there was a moment when she was very lucid. I do remember she actually asked me, because she knew that I do believe this life doesn't end with death. So she asked me, I had an opportunity. She asked me what happens to someone dies. And so I interpreted it as that's a signal from her that she really wants to know, and she's want to be ready. So, and then at the same time, I knew it was really a difficult question for somebody who is in a hospital bed, no longer feed herself, no longer take care of herself. And then I knew that she asked that question. She said someone, but that I knew she was asking about herself. So I was able to say, well, yes, there's nothing to be afraid of. It's okay. Nothing bad will happen when death comes. There will be the light. And then you look for the light and you go towards the light, and then your mother, your brother, your father will all greet in that light. And then again, she didn't respond to that. She didn't make any comments, but I do, you know, through doing the ceremony, I got this nonverbal communication, like Victor was talking about. This image that you know, I was with my mother accompanying this mountain path that she's ascending. I'm really behind her, and then just making sure that she's keep going. And that register was very clear. And then I do believe that she really, the ceremony really helped her to make that journey.
I'm curious, has doing this work affected your own belief about what death is?
Absolutely. I think both of us would say that we no longer believe in death so much, you know, and it's almost as if, you know, there's two sacred moments in a person's life. One is at birth, and the other one is dying. And when you're with somebody and accompanying them, at the moment they die, something else happens, and it's inexplicable, but people feel it. You feel that there's this presence in the room with you. You feel that life doesn't finish with the death of the physical body at all. And when you witness that, it kind of gives you more faith that life doesn't end in death. It's experiential. You experience it.
Mm-hmm. Totally. I I agree with that. When my mother passed, I definitely felt like a new life form, as if that was being born. I always sort of use an example because people feel like that sounds weird when somebody just died. But for me, it was very similar or pretty much the same to when I witnessed a baby was born. There's something about, like Jenny said, it's not, the word can't describe, but it's just something so extraordinary. That something so precious is in the air. And then I definitely, I mean, after that experience, life doesn't end with death. I can say I do believe that with conviction. It really, that experience became the best moment and the best experience of my life. And it really opened my future. But I know at the same time that it really opened my mother's future as well.
Thank you both. I'd love to keep going on talking about this forever. It's fascinating, but I'm just realizing we're getting a little bit towards the end, and I'd like to bring Victor back and also open it up to see if there's any questions from people watching us today to ask for any of us related to any of the presentations or any of the things that we talked about today. We have the first question. So the first question is, how do you see this theme related today to what's going on with the COVID pandemic that's happening to the world? How do you see the relevance of this theme today?
Oh, I'd love to answer that.
Okay, go ahead, Janet.
I just think this pandemic, as horrific as it's been for a lot of people, has brought us some gifts. And one of them is we've had to stop doing so many things. And the specter of death is now on one shoulder. I mean, a lot of people have died from COVID already. And so I feel that in this moment, you have an opportunity, if you haven't reconciled with loved ones, whether they're sick or not, it doesn't matter. If you still need to reconcile with people you love or friends, do it now. Don't wait. I feel that this pandemic is just urging you to not wait any longer to reconcile your life or help others reconcile theirs. It's so important. And for us, it's been life-changing. I won't get into it, but in our relationships at home, we sat down, we said, look, this could be it. This COVID thing could be it for us. And so looking at our own mortality, we said, how can we work as a team now? What do we need to let go of? How can we live better? And so I think it's giving us a tremendous opportunity because death is co-present now. It's no longer something that you can put in the closet and say, well, it could happen at any time. So
I think this is the moment that we can start having conversation about death and then sort of giving the humanizing aspect of dying process, like Victor's talking about. It's a cultural thing. Well, it's all throughout the world, but it's in our culture deeply not to talk about death or dying. It's kind of it's dark and it's not a good thing. But I think, as you said, yes, death is so prevalent right now. So this is another given opportunity for us to start thinking about or talking about dying. I mean, good death. How can we make a good death?
We have another question for Victor, which is, where can we find your book, and is it available in English?
Well, the book is in Spanish, in English, also in Portuguese. So you can find in the book in many parts, study and reflection, and also in Amazon. You can find it, the Art of Accompaniment in English. But well, in Amazon and in the parks.
I should say that Victor has very generously donated books to Hudson Valley Park to help us in our campaign. So we're very appreciative of that too. So you can also get them through anyone connected to our park if you want to do that and help us to support our park. I have another question, which is last question, which is, can you reconcile with the dying person if they have no interest?
Mm.
Can you repeat the question, Dennis?
Yes. Can you reconcile with the dying person if they have no interest in reconciliation?
Well, I only a comment. This is an idea that someone is asking, but I have many very important experience where people that I was accompanying, and they say, I don't want to remember nothing, I don't want to do nothing, no, I don't want to talk about this. A lot of mental suffering, no? A lot of, but the last day, the last hour, all changed. I am sure that at least in the last minute, all this type of thinkings, all of type of idea to reject many intellectual things because they don't want to talk about this, the mind started the process of internal reconciliation. I am sure at least the last second. It is not a matter of chronological time. Is something that is happen internally in all the persons. So, and I had 2 or 3 experience that impact me very strongly, because at the last hour he say me, Victor, all is okay. But it doesn't matter the word, because I feel that he was talking about this type of reconciliation. Last hour. And other experience in the last minute, you saw the face, some kind of signals, that the person started a process to relax in deep. So I am sure that this is an internal process that, and it is not a matter of chronological time. But if you can help, better.
Great. Thank you. My producer has told me that it's very important that we stick to our time schedule. So unfortunately, I'm going to need to bring this presentation to an end. I'm extremely grateful to the 3 of you for sharing your experiences with us and your knowledge. It's been fascinating, very, very helpful. I will remind people that this video will also continue to be available on the links that you gave. If you know of others who might be interested, please share it with them. We'll also be putting it on our Hudson Valley Park website. The website address is there on the bottom of the screen, thehudsonvalleypark.org. So if you can also send people there to check it. And this has been a very, very rich theme, and perhaps requires a second presentation. So maybe we'll think about doing that. There's so much involved in it. So again, thank you very much to Victor, to Janet, to Emiko. We're really appreciative, and thank you to all for joining us here today. And we hope you'll join us again for the next thing that we do in this series. So thank you very much.